stripes, florals, polka dots. Today, we're going to talk about pattern. If the idea of combining patterns feels a little bit outside your comfort zone, then today is for you. Stick around because I'm going to talk about pattern personality, and then I'm going to talk about some rules about pattern mixing that will help take the guesswork out of it for you. So first, what do I mean by pattern personality? I'm going to give you 3 images to look at to help you see what your pattern personality is. The first one has a lot of bold patterns. Even the big upholstery pieces are patterned. The curtains have pattern. The rug has pattern. There is a lot of pattern in this space. The second image has less pattern. There might be an upholstered patterned drapes and some patterned throw pillows, but it's definitely down a notch from the first picture. And the third option has very minimal pattern. There might be some patterned throw pillows or a patterned small accent chair, but the overwhelming fabrics and textures in the room are solid. Which one of these appeals to you most? Once you know the level of pattern that you like, then we can talk about how to mix the patterns that are in the space. The second question I'm often asked is, which one do I pick first? If I like pattern, which pattern do I start with? I like to start off with the rug and then my statement fabric, which doesn't mean it has to be a bold pattern. It just means it's my main fabric that I'm going to use to set my color palette. And then I choose the paint. And often I'm not even painting if the paint is a neutral color. But the reason I like to go in that order is because you're going with the item with the fewest choices to the item with the most. Another common question is, how many patterns do I use? And that's why I like to ask the pattern personality question, because there's no right answer. For some people, that might be 5 patterns. For some people, that is too much and they really only like 1 or 2. It's not so important the number of patterns, it's that they work together. And now I'm going to talk about how to make your patterns work together. And there are some basic rules that you should follow when you're picking patterns. You should always pick your main fabric first, and that's the piece of fabric that's going to make a statement by either going on your drapes or on a headboard or on a bigger piece of upholstered furniture. And then it's easier to pick your secondary fabrics to go along with that main piece. So we're going to call that the showstopper. That doesn't mean it has to be bold, but that is the fabric where you can choose your other fabrics that coordinate with that. If you're not someone that likes a lot of pattern, you can still use smaller patterns in less overpowering places. Instead of a sofa, you cover a chair. Instead of big drapes, you might use a smaller Roman shade that has a pattern. So you use your pattern in smaller places. So there are 3 basic rules to mixing pattern, and they have to do with scale, contrast, and balance. So the main rule about scale is that all of your fabrics should be different scale. Some have a large pattern, some have a medium pattern, and some have a small pattern. You don't want to pick 2 fabrics usually that have a really large pattern, because then they're competing for attention. Even if it's not a bold color, if it's a muted color, you still want to have fabrics that have a different size to them. The rule around contrast means that the fabrics need to look different enough. And an easy way to tell that is if you set the fabrics next to each other and you squint your eyes, are they different enough with your eyes squinted that you can tell they're different? And I didn't come up with this rule, but it's an easy way to test. And one way to make sure you do that is if you pick, let's say, a large botanical and a medium-sized geometric and a stripe. Those patterns have enough contrast that you can easily tell they're different. Or you can choose a large floral and a medium stripe and a small dot print. So those are all different size and they have a lot of contrast. And the third rule is about balance. And this means that you pick some that are bolder and some that are more muted. If every pattern in your room is bold, it can feel more chaotic. You might love that. In most spaces, people are not comfortable with lots of bold fabrics in one room. What if you don't like pattern? If you don't like pattern, the way to keep your space interesting is to make sure that there are lots of different textures. Use cotton, use wool, use a chunky knit, use velvet, use a solid color that has pattern to it. These things give a room that doesn't have pattern enough interest. So here are some ideas about where to add pattern if you don't like a lot of pattern in your space. You can use it on throw pillows. You can use it on lampshades. You can use it in throw blankets. You can use it on small upholstered pieces, like a small accent chair or a bench or a footstool. But if you like a lot of pattern, you can take it up a notch and move to wallpaper or drapes. But if you're someone who has a pattern personality where you don't like a lot of pattern, don't spend a lot of money on wallpaper that has a lot of pattern and drapes, because you're not going to like it for that long. And I find this myself. I chose some drapes that had a really bold pattern for my bedroom, and I loved it for about 2 years. But then I got really sick of the drapes. So now it's your turn. I challenge you to find some patterns that go together. Tag me on social. One thing we didn't talk about was color. So a good thing to do with your main fabric is to choose some colors from that fabric that coordinate in the other secondary patterns. Or it could be solids, or it could be a smaller pattern that coordinates with your main fabric. And that's all about setting your color palette for your room, which I've done a bunch of other videos about how to do that.